Welcome in to Wild Dogs and Hogs, the North Carolina Sports Network's big college football weekly extravaganza. I'm your host, Mike Waddell, joined by the expert analyst and former Elon fighting Christian. Back in the day, he was a fighting Christian. We're talking about Coach Jim Collins. How you doing there, Jimmy?
I am great, Michael. How about you? Looking forward to a nice little discussion about the upcoming season after a 0 week kicked off last week, and we're into week 1. So let's kick it off and go.
Well, before we start talking about all that's going on in week 0 of college football, let's talk about you, because I got a chance to meet you when we were together as teammates with the Orlando Apollos of the Alliance of American Football, what I call the best 9 months of my career, because it was like being an AD, only I had no academics, nothing really to worry about, and I got a chance to work with an incredible group of people with head ball coach Steve Spurrier, Tim Ruskell, our general manager, and of course you, Jimmy. I mean, it's a pleasure to be back with you again and to be a part of this next stage for you as you go from coaching icon to media personality.
Well, you know, that was a great year. And if anybody wants to know, we were the champions of that league, and I do have the ring to prove it. So it's exciting for me, Mike, because I'm moving into a new part of my life, and that doesn't involve getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, being in a meeting at 6 o'clock, and then getting home at 11:30 at night. So my life has changed quite a bit. I work out at 8:30 in the morning till about noontime. That's why noon worked for me today. And then if the hurricane's not coming, I would probably go play golf this afternoon.
Well, it's more time for us to play golf later on, so save all those birdies and eagles and those magical putts that I hear you have on the green. I hear you're the boss of the moss. Big time.
I don't know about all that. I'm not playing very well right now, so I need to practice without a doubt.
Sandbagger. Well, let's talk about your career. Of course, you are a North Carolinian through and through, a native son, class of '74 at Elon. Again, back when they were called the Fighting Christians. You've really done it all. Let's read this, because I've got to read this out. I couldn't commit this to memory. You have participated in 20 bowl games as a coach, including the 1989 All-American Bowl with Duke, the 1992 Sugar, the 1992 Gator, because the 1992 Sugar was on New Year's Day. The Gator Bowl was later that year in December.
Right.
Let's talk about the 1994 Sugar Bowl, the 1995 Sugar Bowl. You've been to New Orleans a lot.
5 times. 5 Sugar Bowls.
1996 Fiesta, 97 Sugar, 98 Citrus, even though you weren't with UT, but bump ching. 1999 Orange.
That's a good call there. It takes UT.
2000 Citrus, 2001 Sugar, 2002 Orange, 2004 Fort Worth Bowl. That's when we start to get to the different bowl games, and we've all been there.
Career took a little slide at that point.
I've been to the Poulan Weed Eater Independence Bowl, brother.
I've been to Shreveport myself, as you continue to read.
It was crazy. You got the 2012 Belt, 2013 Chick-fil-A, 2014 Hyundai Sun Bowl, where Bernie Olivas got you a nice pair of cowboy boots, I hope.
He did.
2015 New Era Pinstripe Bowl. So you've been to Yankee Stadium. You and Mickey Mantle on the same field. The Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit that I've also been a part of when I was at Akron in 2005. The 2018 Walk-Ons Independence Bowl. The 2021 Duke's Mayo Bowl, and the 2022 Holiday Bowl, the last two, with Matt Brown's second edition staff at the University of North Carolina. Now, along the way, you've coached at Lees-McRae, go Bobcats, Appalachian State, go Mountaineers. They're in there somewhere back here. You've been at Jacksonville State, where you've been a Gamecock. That had to be hard. We'll talk about that.
It was long before I'd moved into some other areas at that point in time. So
exactly. Florida with Coach Spurrier at 90 through 2001. The Redskins with Coach Spurrier 2002 and 2003. Marshall 2004, 2006, and then Duke under head coaches Steve Sloan 83, then again 85 and 86. Coach Spurrier 87 through 89. David Cutcliffe, 2008 through 2015, and then again with Cut, 2019, 20, and 21, and then Elon in 21, Back to the Future, and North Carolina in 21 and 22. So you've been around. I mean, first of all, how much of this stuff do you still have in your closet, Jimmy? Because you got to have like the greatest museum closet of all time.
Well, that's interesting. Except I love your paraphernalia behind you. Fortunately for me, all of my stuff, my wife here, when we moved out of Chapel Hill and moved to Wilmington, she said, you got to do something with all this stuff. So all of my stuff is in my townhouse in St. Simon's Island. She calls that the I Love Me room. So I have an I Love Me room. I do. And believe it or not, in that closet there, I have every hat and every shirt that I coached in a bowl game. So
how many visors do you have?
I was not a visor guy. I was a hat guy. Now I have been, as you hold that up, if you ever get the opportunity to go to Gainesville, you need to go to Coach Spurrier's restaurant, and it's the bar there, the upstairs bar there is called Visors, and it has, I think, every visor that he wore, every type visor that he's worn in his coaching career. So now, you have the Apollos. Oh, there you go.
No, this isn't an Apollos. This was when we didn't even have a name yet.
Yeah. But
they had the little, there you go, HBC. And this is actually worn. You can see some Spurrier sweat right there. So
I can. Was that from our mini camp at Jones High School?
Oh God. Thank God, no. No, by then we already had a name. This was from, I think, when I first met Steve and Tim, and we were in Atlanta at a combine, and we actually saw a lineman. And, you know, I love a lineman. That's where he had the name here. Wild Dogs and Hogs is really a tribute to you being a defensive and a linebacker specialist and me loving the big guys. But we're watching Ruskell, who used to be the president and GM of the Seattle Seahawks, and Spurrier. I mean, great football minds, and me, who doesn't fit. But we're watching this combine of people. We had enough running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, safeties, corners, linebackers. We had all that. What we didn't have were big dudes, because big dudes, when they get out of college, they're either losing all their weight or they're going up to like quadruple X if they weren't already before. I watched a dude, literally, Jimmy, run a 9.240. Oh, and I looked at Ruskell, and my man Ruskell is just perfect. He just looks at me and says, I think we won't be taking him. But that was the day where Michael Vick literally ran a 40 and did it in 4.2. He could still go straight ahead. Really? Oh, but if he went side to side, my man could not. He lost all of his momentum. I mean, his knees were bad, but straight forward, he was as good as he ever was. He was something else. But yeah, man, it was a good time. I really appreciated that time in Orlando. And again, cut way too short. But when you look back over your career, how much has it changed since when you came out and you were at Lee's McRae in that first coaching job? And how much has that changed until 2022 when you finished out your coaching career with Matt Brown and the Tar Heels at the Holiday Bowl?
The game, both on the field and off, are so different than they were then. The game on the field in those early years, we could play. We could basically play the game in this room I'm sitting in right now, because everybody was in two backs. They were in sometimes two tight ends, but everybody had a fullback and a tight end on the field, and it was going to try to run the football and stay not as complex as you could imagine. All of a sudden, the game has involved that you have to defend all 53 yards of the field now, because people are in so many variations of formations and so many personnel groupings. And the way we refer to personnel groupings is, some people give them names. The easiest way to know when we talk personnel is most people number them. And so 10 personnel, for example, when you hear somebody refer to that, That's easy. That's 4 wides and 1 back. 12 personnel is 1 back and 2 tight ends. 21 personnel is 2 backs and 1 tight end. 11 personnel is 1 back and 1 tight end. So that's basically, in those days, we were all in 21 and 22 personnel. Right. Now it's almost all 12, 11, 12, and 20 personnel in the game. So it's changed a great deal. Recruiting in college football is so different than it was then. There's so many obstacles, and plus, at least during that time, you could get a little break from recruiting. Now recruiting is 365, 24/7.
We're talking with Jimmy Collins. I'm Mike Waddell, and this is Wild Dogs and Hogs. Jimmy went to Elon. I played at Guilford. And let's go back to what you were just talking about, that 21 personnel, because back in the day when I was growing up watching football, I was watching Bill Dooley, North Carolina teams, Dick Crum, North Carolina teams. That's what I grew up on. I played for Charlie Forbes at Guilford. They were all the same. It was power I. In Dick Crum's thing, it was steer clear, we've got the veer. That did not start out well because he came to Carolina from Miami, Ohio, and then Miami, Ohio comes to Chapel Hill in game 1 and beats North Carolina. That was an ugly aftermath of that game. I remember that when I was 9 years old. And the things I heard my dad and my godfather, who is the captain of Carolina's 63 Gator Bowl team, the things I heard out of their mouths, Jimmy, it was not good. But there's been a real change when it comes to football. And, guys like, most recently in the Atlantic Coast Conference, you have a guy like Paul Johnson, Avery County guy, great coach at Georgia.
Lee's McRae guy. You didn't realize Paul's first coaching job in college was at Lee's McRae also.
See? And right there, Western Carolina graduate from Avery County, woolly worm capital of the world. He does a great job with Adrian Peterson and the running backs at Georgia Southern for all those years, battling against Jerry Moore and App. And then he gets to Georgia Tech, and he's running that triple option Army, Navy, Fisher DeBerry, Air Force type of offense. And that used to be such a tough thing to stop. But you had to get ahead or you were dead, okay, because you couldn't come back quick in those games. And now you look at it now, it's all RPO. I mean, it was frustrating. I'll tell you as a fan, look, I went to Guilford. I've worked at all these different schools. I'm not really a fan of any school anymore, but I watch a lot of Carolina football, and it was frustrating watching Carolina and really frustrating watching Wake Forest with that delay, draw. It's like, just tackle somebody. But it seems to have really taken over the world of football in a big way.
Well, it has. The air raid is a huge factor in today's game, and the air raid is going to be prominent in the ACC right now, especially with what's going on at Clemson with the new coordinator at Clemson being Riley, and that's going to be a factor. And there are other people that are. And then at a couple of other places, the air raid has become a real factor in our game.
Dabo was on with David Glenn on the North Carolina Sports Network and our premier content, the David Glenn Show, last week. And he said that when he made the change at offensive coordinator, he wouldn't have hired a pure air raid type guy. And that Lincoln Riley and Garrett Riley together have figured out what a lot of people say, and I think you can expand on this, even how North Carolina is evolving offensively here in 2023, that you got to run the ball. You can't just have somebody back there trying to wing it 50 times a game, because eventually people catch on. So at Clemson, Dabo is calling it now the dirt raid, which is kind of a throwback. I know, Jimmy, one of the other coaches I worked on, one of the coaching staffs that I worked with a lot was at the United States Military Academy at West Point, when Todd Berry, who is the immediate past president of the American Football Coaches Association, was our head coach. And he had just come in from Illinois State, where he'd done a great job at the FCS level and took over at Army. And his mindset was to do kind of like that. We were going to throw to set up the run. It just never worked with the athletes that we had at West Point. But it's innovators like that and figuring out that balance because, you know, even Mike Leach had trouble, God rest his soul, towards the end of his career, you know, trying to maintain real superiority the way that some people have done. But that balance, getting that ground game going, I think that's key. And I think we'll see that coming up Saturday night when you see both North Carolina and South Carolina going at it, with both teams having new coordinators.
Well, as you've said earlier, I worked for 19 years for one of the best offensive minds that have ever coached a game, and a Hall of Famer in Steve Spurrier. But Steve will be the first one to tell you that you have to be able to run the football. There comes a time, whether you set it up with the pass, but eventually you got to control the ball and get your defense off the field. You know, we live in the world of no huddle and hurry up football and those things, but still you have to be able to play defense. You got to be able to stop the other team a little bit. But the biggest factor in the game you mentioned earlier right now, and that's the run pass option, or RPOs as people refer to it. And the people that are really good at it, and Wake Forest and we saw how good Sam Hartman can be at Notre Dame. He lit it up. I think he was 18 out of 23 with 4 touchdowns against the Naval Academy in Ireland. But Wake Forest is excellent with RPOs, and then you're going to see a change at NC State with the creativity of Robert Anai, and Brennan Armstrong there. So there are changes all over the place, and North Carolina had a change at offensive coordinator, but Chip Lindsey has an air raid background also, but he also has a background with some other folks that have run the football. So the thing about North Carolina is, and what Coach Brown wants to do and has always wanted to do, he wants to run the football along with use Drake May's talents, and those are great talents without a doubt.
Last week when we were on site with the Old North State tailgate at Jimmy's in Wrightsville Beach, and a shout out to Jimmy, his wife Keaton, Jared, the entire staff down in Wilmington. What an incredible place that is. I can't wait to get back down there. But as we were talking about North Carolina football, one of the things that David brought up was the lack in the history of the Heisman Trophy, that the state of North Carolina has had very few people really compete for the Heisman Trophy. Choo-Choo was back-to-back runners-up. Charlie Justice, back-to-back runners-up for the Heisman back in the post-war years. You had, obviously, Phillip Rivers was the top 10 vote getter. Sonny Jurgensen at Duke was the top vote getter. But if you think about all the great quarterbacks, a lot of those were with you at Duke when you were there under Coach Spurrier. And even Drake May's dad, who is a heck of a player, Mark May, Moorhead Scholar out of Independence High School in Charlotte. This guy was a huge arm, but Dick Crum, steer clear. We got the veer, and he was handing off. At North Carolina, it's never really been the quarterback that has taken center stage. It's been guys like Don McCauley, Boom Boom Betterson, Space Cowboy, Mike Voigt, my guys, Amos Lawrence, Kelvin Bryant, who I just absolutely, that 81 season, I really think he would have won the Heisman if he doesn't tear the cartilage down at Grant Field in Game 4. But you just look over the history of Carolina, Derek Fenner, Tyrone Anthony, it's always been the running back. So is Carolina going to get back to running the football and having guys go over 1,000 and maybe testing that 2,000-yard mark? Or are we going to see another year of wing it, wing it, wing it, wing it?
Well, just back up a couple of years with North Carolina, with Phil Longo, when the Orange Bowl year, when they played Texas A&M in the Orange Bowl, great year. I think that was a 9-win season that year. Well, they had 2 great tailbacks that are both very, very successful players in the NFL right now. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, both of them were either, one was a 1,000-yard rusher and the other one was close. And the Williams kid, I think, broke more tackles than anybody in the country. So it takes a little bit of talent to be a running back also. I've looked here, and I have it in my hand, actually, the depth chart at running back, and you at North Carolina right now with you got five guys listed there. You know, I love a little bit about all of them, but who's going to step forward? Who's going to be that guy for them? And I think the South Carolina North Carolina game on Saturday night is as interesting to me as any game that's occurring in the first week, along with the Florida State LSU game. So that'd be an interesting kickoff in Charlotte on Saturday night.
That's Coach Jimmy Collins. I'm Mike Waddell. When we come back from this timeout, we're going to talk more here on Wild Dogs and Hogs about that big game coming up at Bank of America Stadium a little before 8 o'clock kickoff, ABC, national television, ESPN game day in downtown Charlotte, Duke's Mayo Classic at Bank of America Stadium. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about that game, and we'll talk more about the ACC's top players, specifically out of that ESPN Top 100. The players from North Carolina who are playing at Duke, NC State, and for the Tar Heels. And even one guy we'll talk about who does it down at Clemson, who is a son of Charlotte as well. We're talking about my man, Will Shipley. We'll do that when we come back after this. You're tuned in to Wild Dogs and Hogs on the North Carolina Sports Network.
I wasn't born a leader.
It wasn't given to me.
I couldn't buy it.
How'd I get here?
I decided.
I decided.
I decided.
I decided.
Decide to lead as an Army officer.
It's week one of the 2023 college football season right here in the Old North State of North Carolina, and you're tuned in to the North Carolina Sports Network and our brand new college football weekly show, Wild Dogs and Hogs. We're with the coach, Jimmy Collins. I'm Mike Waddell. Jimmy went to Elon. I went to Guilford College. I've also worked at North Carolina and Appalachian State here in North Carolina, while Jimmy has coached all over the Old North State. He's played high school and college football here as well. And Jimmy, over your 40-year career in coaching, what is the mindset that a position coach or a head coach, just anybody on a coaching staff, has going into that first game of the season?
Well, I think the main thing that you concentrate on is, and we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago, is the conditioning of your team, and to make sure that you're in the best shape that you can possibly be to play, depending on the weather. And of course, we're in North Carolina, and there's a good chance it's going to be in the 80s and humid in all over the state, unless you're in Boone. But I think conditioning is the number one thing. But when you move positionally, I think the main thing is establishing who your starters are and who your backups are and who you can count on and feel good about playing in the game, and what situations you feel good about putting them in the game. So that the establishment of your depth and what that fits your game plan is absolutely critical now. Today is Wednesday that we're doing this. And this is a critical day. If you go through the week, this is third down day that they're prepping on. Who's on your nickel package? Who's going to play in your dime package? What are we doing on third down? You know, what rushes are we going to have on third down? So, and who fits in those packages? So it's all about personnel, getting your personnel right at this time.
Earlier in the week, the NFL trimmed their rosters down to what they'll take into their week one coming up next week. But they've had to have those general managers, those head coaches in the NFL, they've had those tough conversations with the players. Hey, you're not going to make the roster. We'll put you on the taxi squad, or we'll keep you over here. You know, keep going at it. Keep chasing your dream. On the college level, you know they're going to be with you. But in this day and age of name, image, and likeness, if somebody's not playing, they might just hop. I mean, they might hop right now. They might hop in the middle of the year. They might hop at the end of the year. But it's a different ball game right now. So how much strategy and how much do you share with a student athlete at the beginning of the season about where their long-term prospects are?
Well, I think that's absolutely critical that you communicate with the players that are in your room. They have to know how you feel about their abilities to play in a game and why. You have to tell them why they're not getting playing time. And you document all those things. As a coach, you have to document all of it. You have practice video, you have scrimmage video, you have all this video to look at. That's why you study the video with them. You keep all your records on everything that's happened, and that way you can justify why. It's not enough to just walk in and say, "Hey, I'm gonna start Jim over Mike just because I like Jim better than Mike." That doesn't cut it. It has nothing to do with who you like and who you dislike and who's a jerk and who's not a jerk. It has to do with who can help us win and win now. Because let's face it, winning is what this is all about. I don't care what anybody says. It's not. It is about winning, and the way you keep a job as a coach is your players will play very close to how you've coached them. And if they're not playing well, you're either allowing it to happen or you're not coaching them well enough. So to establish who's going to play in the game, how much they're going to play in the game, and in what situations they're going to play is absolutely critical right now.
And I got to imagine for you as a coach, just some of the parental things that you have to deal with in 2023, a lot different than what you had back in the early 80s. I know when I was a senior administrator at some big-time college football programs, I was listening to my coaches tell me about what was going on. I said, "You got to be kidding me. You had parents calling you. I mean, you're a Big Ten or an SEC head football coach, and you're getting calls about playing time from a parent." And one of my coaches said, "Yeah, I don't talk to them. That's what my director of football operations does." But you've been that too. So, you know, when you were with Coach Cutcliffe and you were doing that off the field job, you were really essential to what David was trying to do on a day-to-day basis. How much was the head coach involved in that stuff, or how much did he try to kind of stay at arm's length away from that?
Well, the thing is, Mike, it depends who you work for and whom you work with. I've been very fortunate from the time that I played. Almost everybody, I don't know what happened to me, but almost everybody I've been around is a Hall of Famer, whether it's a state Hall of Famer or a national Hall of Famer. So I've been around some really good people, from Red Wilson to Jerry Tolley to Mac Brown to Steve Spurrier to David Cutcliffe. You go on and on. And Bobby Stoops. I could go on and on and on with the people that I've had the opportunity to work with and for, and they all have different philosophies on it. And you know, Coach Cutcliffe, for example, Coach Cut had his hand in absolutely everything, and he handled all those situations. And he was the first one to tell you, if you have trouble with a parent, tell them to talk to me. And Coach Brown is a lot that way also. Coach Brown handles a lot of those situations, and different head coaches have different philosophies. I'll be honest with you, in all the years that I was in this business, I had very little problems with parents, and it's changed some now because of the transfer portal. They'll want to know why Jim is not playing, and they want to know right now how much he's going to play. If not, then we're leaving. So it's a different world out there.
When I was at the University of Cincinnati, I worked for three very different head football coaches. I worked for Mark D'Antonio, who left after our 2006 season and went on to Michigan State, where he had a great career. I worked with Brian Kelly, who has the unique distinction. I love telling this story because it really does wow people. Brian Kelly is an answer to a fantastic trivia question. Who is the only college football coach ever, Division III, Division II, Division I, FCS or FBS, to be the head coach and beat the same team twice in the same season as the head coach of two different schools? See, I hit the camera right there. I get so excited telling this. So he's the head coach in the his last season at Central Michigan, and they beat Bill Cubitt and Western Michigan, the Broncos, in the MAC regular season. Then he takes the Cincinnati job after Mark goes off to East Lansing. Mark doesn't coach our bowl game, the International Bowl played at Sky Dome. awful, just absolutely hideous because it was so expensive to make that trip. Had to get rid of passports, logistical nightmare. But Brian takes 3 GAs and 2 assistant coaches and probably a few people, out of the Hockey Hall of Fame, and he beats Cubitt and the Broncos again. And I love to tell that story, except when I was on the staff at Illinois with Bill, and he says, never tell that damn story again. And it was fun. But Brian was very different. He's not like Cut or Mac. Brian wouldn't talk to you. He didn't care if you were a parade All-American. We had a running back, Isaiah P., that had broken all of Archie Griffin's high school rushing records in the great state of Ohio, comes into Cincinnati, and he's not on the 2 deep. Brian ain't talking to him. I mean, if you were not on his 24, and he never talked to specialists, if you were not on his 24, you didn't exist. And so that's very different. Then I had Butch Jones, and Butch would talk to anybody, but Butch also had a playbook that he basically gave everybody connected to his football program administratively, whether it be myself or, football secretary, anybody in the office there. It had 365 pages in it. What you were supposed to do every single day of the year, Jimmy.
Right.
To talk to. But Butch would talk to parents and would put them to sleep because he just kept going and going and going. So it's very different. But now these head coaches this week, let's just talk about Shane Beamer and Matt Brown. This week, they're getting ready for this Dukes Mayo Classic. National TV, a lot of hype. South Carolina coming off a great close of their season last year, beating Clemson, killing Tennessee, coming up short in a bowl game, but still very positive in Columbia. North Carolina coming off 4 straight losses going into this weekend's game in Charlotte. And now awful situations going on in Chapel Hill earlier this week. And our thoughts and prayers go with everybody there at the University of North Carolina, from the chancellor, Kevin Guskowitz, on down to the faculty and the students, people of Chapel Hill. But that's a distraction. And it's hard for Mac and those guys to manage that, just like it's going to be hard for Shane Beamer and his guys to manage this hurricane that is going to cause massive issues and flooding in Columbia, South Carolina. So when you're a coach, how do you deal with these types of distractions and make sure that your guys are just thinking about football when that's probably not going to happen?
Well, obviously it's not going to happen. And I think those are things that as a head coach and a position coach, that you have to address up front. You can't run and hide from them. And you can't deny, I'm sure both teams have, and teams all around this country have players that are in the path of this hurricane. Their families are in the path of this hurricane, and you have to make sure that you're taking care of the players' mental health and everybody within your system's mental health, because mental health is such a big thing now in our country, and you have to address those things. And as the CEO, and that's what the head coach is the CEO of the program, those are things that have to be talked about in meetings, whether it be staff meetings and full team meetings, and then address them. As me as a position coach, I have to handle those people in my room, and I've got to be able to walk in there. I've got to know if I walk into my room and Mike Waddell is playing linebacker for me, I need to know Mike Waddell's family, and I need to say, hey, are they okay? Do they understand what is going on this campus right now? And so that's just part of dotting the I's and crossing the T's as a position coach and a head coach.
And while we're talking about Matt Brown and Shane Beamer and Mike Elko and Dave Doran and Dave Clausen, all of the big time coaches here in the Big Four, we've not talked a lot about the coaches at the lower Division I, the football championship subdivision, the old 1AA, or Division II or Division III. And those coaches have to deal with all of the same things that the Big Four guys do. They just have less resources. So it's really on them. And I got to tell you, Jimmy, I was very blessed to work with National Amateur Sports and James Shipley in the Wake County public school system, and putting on the U.S. Army Clash, Be All You Can Be Clash at the Wake Med Soccer Park back on the 19th of August. And getting to know the high school coaches at Millbrook and Apex Friendship and, Middle Creek, and, of course, Jeb Hall over at Fuquay Arena, these guys. I mean, we're going to talk on Wild Dogs and Hogs. We're going to talk football at all levels. We're talking more college this week. But the guys who are getting it done at the high school level and at the smaller college level, that's yeoman's work, because they don't have everything that they need to do their jobs to the maximum of their ability, but they're still out there slaving and doing it in this hot sun for very, very low pay, and especially at the high school level.
Well, that's a great point that you make, and again, I'm going to bring up my past a little bit, because my first job out of college, and as I said, I played for a legend in this state. A lot of people won't remember me. Coach Red Wilson just passed away a couple of years ago, and Coach Wilson was a man that never ever forgot anybody's name. He remembered everybody's name that he ever met, parents, everybody. And then my first job was as a high school coach for a guy by the name of Marion Kirby, who is a Hall of Famer in this state. Again, just passed away recently. He was my mentor. I worked for him for 6 years, and he taught me something very special, that they will forgive you. The players will forgive you for working them too hard. They will never forgive you for not working them hard enough to develop them. And the other thing that he taught me, it's your job to develop them as people, not just football players. And I think the coaches that are in this state, I'm talking about high school coaches and our major college head coaches and all that, do a wonderful job of developing young people. Because just think about this. How many times have you seen the players, and I'm talking about from Wake Forest all the way to East Carolina to App State, all over the state, how many times have you seen our players in this state in the headlines for doing things that they shouldn't be doing? Very few times. So they're doing things the right way in this state, and our administrators have done a nice job of selecting good people that are developing good football players, but they're also developing good students and good potential husbands and fathers down the road. I really believe in that very strongly.
And we're going to see two of those great coaches that we've not yet talked about on today's show when the Old North State tailgate rolls into Boone on September 16th for that big cross-state rival between East Carolina and one of the most fantastic coaches and just guys that I've gotten to know over the years, Mike Houston. And then one of my favorite human beings in the world, whose helmet is right over here on my shelf, Sean Clark, who's the head coach at Appalachian State. I mean, these are guys that I'd want my son Drew to play for. I mean, they're just solid, good to the earth type fellas. And we're very blessed here with Wild Dogs and Hogs. I'm sure we're going to have both of those guys on at some point this year. I know I'll have Big Sean on because he's just a treat to talk to. But, man, coaches, they really do make a difference. I named my son's middle name is Ketchum after Mike Ketchum, who was my position coach at Guilford. And he's going into his final year of coaching this year. He's at Bluefield, and I can't wait for him to be able to just, just ease back and enjoy a little bit like you're getting ready to do here in the 23 season. But, man, it's a beautiful game, and we're blessed to have had it in our lives. No doubt, no doubt. And just I know, and my last association was obviously with Coach Brown, and he does a tremendous job every single morning of looking after and addressing this team and addressing mental issues and just letting them know that they are special and that we're going to take care of your needs. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is that for these players, their days now, being a morning practice team like North Carolina is, and I'm sure Duke still is because we were when I was there. Their day starts at about 5:30 in the morning because meetings start at 6 and 6:30, and then you're on the practice field by 8. And then you're off the practice field by 10:30. Then you're going to lift weights sometime during the day. And guess what? I haven't even mentioned yet. You got to go to class too. And because there's not a school in this state that you're going to get a degree from, because these are good academic schools in our state also. You guys are going to go to class.
So you're looking at 12, 14-hour days for these players. So do they deserve? I don't know that NIL is the right thing, but do they deserve to make some money? The answer is yes, they deserve to make some money. But we just need to find a better way of handling the system that we're in right now, because these guys have long days now, long seasons, and anybody thinks that it's easy, they're fooling themselves.
And the more games that people keep on adding on, well, have a 18 playoff, have a 16-team playoff, just do all that. It gets to be too much at some point. And we got to remember, these are college students, whether people want to remember that or not. Sometimes fans, that's short for fanatic. They forget to put that proper perspective in here. And I learned that as an administrator, just traveling one season in 2015 at the University of Illinois with our baseball program. Okay. And baseball is a very, very tough sport on people who play it. Same for softball. And especially if you're in a northern climate where it's cold. And I saw that abuse, but well, not really abuse, but just it was very tough. And you're basically on campus 1.5 days a week. But we got to take a break right now. We're behind on the clock. That's the coach, Jimmy Collins. I'm Mike Waddell. We're on the North Carolina Sports Network, and you're tuned in to our weekly college football show, Wild Dogs and Hogs.
What does it mean when people say America is a land of opportunity?
It means the power to discover,
To redefine yourself.
To improve yourself.
to challenge yourself.
To realize there's more in you
Than you ever knew.
that you could do.
It means giving people an open field to explore what they do best.
With the best tools,
The best training.
the best technology in the world.
We bring out the best in the people who serve.
So you can be
All you can be.
Welcome back to the North Carolina Sports Network and Wild Dogs and Hogs, the brand new college football weekly show here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I am Mike Waddell, joined by Coach Jimmy Collins. And Coach, you came up with this title. I loved it. I had something else, but you improved upon it. So that's teamwork right there. Little Eli Guilford teamwork right there with the Piedmont Triad Holy War going on, the fighting Christians and the fighting Quakers, now the fighting Phoenix, and whatever Guilford is right now. They're not putting up a lot of fight as of late, but hopefully that gets better with the Greensboro Soup Bowl coming up this week and the big clash with the Pride, part of the Seven Deadly Sins Conference there at Greensboro College. But let's talk about our title, and it's there for a reason. You are a defensive guru. One of your guys going to be on the field this weekend, and Cedric Gray. I mean, we're going to talk about Cedric in a minute because he's part of this ESPN's top 100 football players in America in college football. But what makes a wild dog? I mean, you've had that terminology. What makes somebody a wild dog that could play for Coach Jim Collins?
Well, the main thing is we were searching for an identity at a job I had a few years ago, and everybody was looking for what identity they had. They wanted to be in their group, and so we sat down, and I had some really, really intelligent kids in the room, and we came up with Wild Dogs because the wild dogs of Africa, and the way and their ability to hunt bigger and stronger animals and be able to win. So that's where the basics of wild dogs came from. But at the same time, if I'm looking for a wild dog, I'm looking for someone that can line up. And when you play linebacker, and I coached linebackers for many, many years, with a linebacker, you got to be the transitional player for the back between the back end and the front end. Well, you got to be able to play the run. You got to be able to play the pass. You got to be able to drop. You got to be able to play man-to-man, all those different things. And you got to have great vision, and you've got to be able to look at things, and you've got to be able to run correct angles. So I wanted somebody that was wild enough and physical enough, but I wanted somebody that could hunt a prey, go seek them, and tackle them and get them on the ground. That's where it came from.
So give me some of your favorite wild dogs over the course of your career.
Oh, geez, that goes back. I can go all the way back to my first time at Duke, and we had a guy that ended up being the second pick in the NFL draft by the name of Mike Junkin. Mike Junkin was a great player, not a good player, but a great player. And then you move into, I had Mike Peterson at the University of Florida. Mike Peterson played 14 years in the league, was an All-American. I had James Bates at the University of Florida, who has turned out to be an outstanding person in his life. I had LeVar Arrington at the Washington Redskins. That's just to name a few. And I tried to hit somebody in pro football, and I tried to hit somebody at different stops. You know, at Duke, I had a guy by the name of Kelby Brown, who is now a neurologist at the University of North Carolina. Had 3 ACLs, but you're talking about a guy that was a 1400 SAT and just as tough, from Charlotte. And just as tough as he could be, and very cerebral, just a really, really good player. And he's, matter of fact, one of the guys that created Wild Dogs. So it just lots and lots more of those guys. I didn't even name Javon Curse, who was the freak at that time. And I had at one point, between Bob Sanders, who's a longtime coach and associate, we had Javon Curse, we had Mike Peterson, and we had Johnny Rutledge were our 3 linebackers at Florida. They later became 3 of the top 58 picks in the draft that next year.
You were playing a 4-3 down there, huh?
Well, we were playing a 4-3, but we ended up playing 4-2-5 with a nickel, because we went to nickel on 3rd down, because Javon was our Sam backer, our strong side backer, and Javon would move to defensive end to rush the passer, a lot like we did with LeVar Arrington with Marvin Lewis at the Redskins. So it's different philosophies that you work with.
So for when you look at those folks and you look back over your career, you say, man, I've worked with some real talented folks, but one of our ESPN Top 100 college football players, and he comes in at number 64, is also a guy that means a lot to you. And we're talking about the senior from the North Carolina Tar Heels, Cedric Gray. Last year, 12 tackles for losses, 6 pass broken ups, 4 quarterback hurries, 3 forced fumbles. So this guy is a missile, man. He's going in to make some contact, 2 picks. I mean, what kind of a player is Cedric Gray for the Tar Heels?
Led the country in tackles with 145. And I left him off that list intentionally because I knew we were going to get to Ced Gray. Ced Gray is a coach's dream now, and by that is he's outstanding in the meeting room. When he walks in the meeting room and you begin an installation, whether it be for a practice or whether it's an installation for a game plan, Ced Gray is tuned in. He's smart. He knows what everybody on the field, the other 10, he knows what their job is, and so he is a leader in that way. He is a leader in the room. He's a leader of the team. And you're talking about tough now. He's tough. He would be a true Wild Dog. And he would. I'll honestly say this, and I seldom ever rate players because I think it's unfair. They're different eras and different times and different teams. But if I had to rate, I would rate Ced Gray in my top 5.
Cedric Gray from that Charlotte Metrolina region. When you look at Drake May, he's another one of the ESPN Top 100, the highest rated of any ACC player in this group. And we're not going to talk about all the ACC players in that list from ESPN, but we'll talk about the ones from the North Carolina schools plus Will Shipley. But let's talk about Drake May. Everybody's talking about Drake May. Everybody's talking about him as a Heisman candidate. Look what he's done. He's the next generation of the great quarterback at Carolina, you know, taking over for Sam Howell, who's QB1 right now with the Commanders. But what is there something about Drake May that we don't know that we should know going into this season, which quite probably is going to be his final one in Carolina Blue?
Drake May is, again, as you would expect, Drake May is a very, very smart football player and studies the game and has great leadership ability. He can see the entire field. He has, but what a lot of people don't realize is that he had over 700 yards rushing last year also. And some of those were off scrambles and things like that. But you'd like for him not to lead your team in rushing again. But at the same time, he has the ability to do those things. He reminds me a great deal, and this is maybe a little sacrilegious, but I'm gonna make this comparison anyway. He reminds me a lot of the starting quarterback for the New York Giants, and that's Daniel Jones, another Charlotte guy, to be honest with you. And they're both long, 6'4", 6'5", in that area, 220, and they're, for big men, big long men, they can both run really, really well. Drake may have a stronger arm than Daniel does, and Daniel was the 6th pick of the first round coming out of Duke. So just an outstanding player, has all the skills.
How competitive did it have to be in the May household? He's got one brother, won a national championship in baseball at Florida, another brother who is playing on the North Carolina basketball team right now in Bow. His brother Luke wins a national championship, hits some big shots for North Carolina en route to one of their title runs. And his dad was the Parade High School Player of the Year in high school football. I mean, if he would have played for somebody, if Mark May would have played for Steve Spurrier,
and we tried to get him to.
I don't know, brother. I'm telling you right there. I mean, you know me. I out of all the coaches in any sport that I've ever worked with, I love the head ball coach. And I have a real pet peeve, and I learned this from him. There was even a guy, a local writer in the Triangle area, that referred to him as the old ball coach. You want to get Steve Spurrier pissed at you? Call him that, because he is the HBC. And that's just, people need to be better when they're trying to talk about it. They're trying to pass themselves as a knowing something. They don't know anything. But can you imagine? Can you imagine? I mean, what was that recruiting battle like, trying to get him out of Independence? Well,
obviously we didn't do very well. I mean, I was the lead recruiter, so we failed a little bit on that at that point in time. But it was not much of a battle. He was going to North Carolina all along. So to say it was a battle would be false. But you're right about Coach Spurrier now. He has a specialness about him. There are people in this business that can see all 22 of them, and he can see all 22 of them on the sidelines. And he has that special ability. If we called him up right now and asked him what the stats were for Garrett Gilbert with the Apollos in the very first Atlanta game that we opened the season with, what the statistics were at halftime, he could tell you exactly what they were. He could give you the score from every game he ever played or coached in. It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Let's talk about another player in that ESPN Top 100 college football players. It was just out on ESPN.com. We've already talked to you about number 5, Drake May, and number 64, Cedric Gray of North Carolina. Let's go outside of the Old North State for a second, but talk about one of North Carolina's best high school products that they've put out in the last few years. We're talking, of course, about the junior playing for Dabo Swinney down at Clemson, Will Shipley. This kid he's an amazing player. He's moved up from number 40 last year in these rankings to number 26, coming off 1,182 yards and 15 touchdowns last year for the Tigers. What kind of a player is Will Shipley?
Well, unfortunately, we saw him up close and personal in the ACC championship game last year. He has the ability to run with it and catch it and protect. He's what you're looking for in a running back. He's not the tallest guy, which this day and time I don't know that you want big long running backs, but he's tough, he's physical, can catch it. He's got all the skills, Mike, without a doubt.
He is something else. Let's talk about NC State. Let's go to a wild dog over there playing for Coach Doran. Now, Dave Doran's a defensive guy. So you got to imagine that Peyton Wilson has to be one of Coach Doran's favorite Wolfpack guys over there. Notable 2022 stats. Peyton Wilson, 12.5 tackles for loss, Coach. 4.5 sacks. I think they had a typo. They said 45 sacks. I'm going to go with 4.5. Yeah. 3 pass broken ups, 1 interception. He wasn't ranked in the top 100 a year ago, but the senior has made it into this elite ranking by ESPN this year, and he's a problem. He's a problem for people.
Yeah, I think from an offensive standpoint, as an offensive coach, you're going to want to know where he's lined up most of the time, because Tony Gibson, who is the defensive coordinator at NC State, and their staff do a nice job with their 3-3 package that's come through West Virginia and traveled with Rich Rod and all that all through those years. But Peyton is a factor. He's a good pass rusher in blitz situations. He's good against the run, good against the pass. He's long and he's physical, and he's from just down the road from where I used to be in Durham. He's a Hillsborough kid, went to Orange High School. So he's a local guy, and it's very successful. Pretty good high school baseball player too. And what's the trivia question about that family? Do you know?
I don't know. Hit me up.
His brother was a heck of a baseball player, professional baseball player also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Orange High School, got to let the Panthers over there in Hillsborough, man. They're turning out some talent. Let's talk about one of my guys, a Hog, the only offensive or defensive lineman to make this ESPN Top 100 from a North Carolina-based school. And we're talking about Graham Barton. Love left tackles. Left tackles are the guardians. They're protecting the blind side, just like Michael Orr. Hopefully they don't have Michael Orr issues. But Graham Barton is a dude. I had a chance to meet him. I've been around that Duke program with Coach Elko, very blue-collar-like. You just get a feel like these guys are going to make some things happen, maybe Monday night against Clemson. But last year, only giving up 2 sacks from that hot corner on 465 pass rush snaps. Now, probably 60 of those pass rush snaps, happened in some of those games that they are trying to come from behind. But that's even more impressive when you look at the type of player that Graham Barton is for the Blue Devils.
Graham Barton, I was actually still with Coach Cutcliffe when during the recruiting process of Graham at Nashville, Tennessee, and he has really blossomed into an excellent player. He's long, he's physical, very, very physical, and their offensive front, and we've left off. They've got 3 returning starters on an offensive line that was pretty good over there, and he's probably the lead guy along with Jacob Monk, who was in his 5th year there. But Graham Barton is an outstanding player and will be a high draft pick also.
Riley Leonard rounds out our North Carolina players in this ESPN Top 100. I met Riley at the ACC football kickoff. Dave Glenn and I were down there. This could be the nicest human being I've ever met. I'm not used to football players being this polite, this nice, this well-spoken, and all of that, and this talented. This kid gets it done. 3,396 yards last year, 33 total touchdowns. And I'll tell you, watching that game in Durham last year, that Duke really should have won. I mean,
don't go there now. Don't go there.
I'm just saying.
I'm just kidding.
And you know me, I grew up one way, but I'm just calling it like I see it. That game was so impressive. And look, people from Carolina made plays, they won the game. But Riley Leonard did as much as a quarterback could humanly do to win that game. It was an impressive performance, and I can't wait to watch him again because I think he has an ace up his sleeve. He's talented. He's going to play on Sundays. But I like this kid because he has a line.
He is extremely talented. Think about this now. Think about our 3 schools here in the Triangle. And we have not mentioned a guy that 2 or 3 years ago, by the name of Brennan Armstrong, while at the University of Virginia, was the best quarterback in this league. And then so we've got 3 great quarterbacks, potentially great quarterbacks right in this triangle in Drake May and Riley Leonard and Brennan Armstrong. So think about the quality of play we're going to get at quarterback in the Old North State this year.
It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and we get to chronicle it every week right here on Wild Dogs and Hogs. So that's your ESPN Top 100. Again, to review, Drake May, number 5. Will Shipley, not from North Carolina school, but he's from North Carolina, from Charlotte, number 26. Ced Gray, Carolina linebacker at 64. Peyton Wilson, linebacker for the Wolfpack at 81. And then a pair of Duke Blue Devils at the end, number 90 player, Graham Barton, offensive tackle, left side, and Riley Leonard, the junior quarterback for the Blue Devils and Coach Mike Elko. Before we let you go, Jimmy, and we're running, this has been such a fast-paced hour. I appreciate you coming on this season. I know your wife, Yvonne, who is a saint beyond saints, is happy to get you into my world for about an hour a week so we can hang out and talk football, so she doesn't have to talk football with you all the time. But two things I want to ask you about. One positive, one a little heartfelt. You spent a lot of time at the University of Florida. You're a Gator. You are. As much as you are anything else, you've really impacted the culture and the history of Florida Gator football, along with the head ball coach, Steve Spurrier. But there's a Netflix series right now out on Gator football called Swamp Kings. I watched it all in one night. I just couldn't get enough of it because, in my opinion, I just kept waiting for something to be talked about, but it wasn't. What were your opinions, having been a part of that culture, knowing that culture, and watching that as a football coach and also a Gator aficionado?
I binged it in one night also. The matter of fact, the first night that it was on, I watched it. You ever fluff your pillow up at night before you put your head on it? I'm going to try to not be overly critical, but it was very fluffy. Now, that was a very fluffy piece, and there were some critical people that were part of that winning process that were left out. And one of them is another Charlotte product. You would think Chris Leak was just a secondhand guy and came into the game in short yardage situations. Well, Chris Leak was the starting quarterback. Tim Tebow was the short yardage back the first year in the 2006 season. So I think it's worth watching, but there's some, people need to do some research, and there's a guy by the name of Zach Smith that was on Urban staff that you might want to do a YouTube search on his take on Swap Kings. It may be interesting listening for you.
We might have to have him come on the show.
His language may be a little saltier than yours and mine. Okay,
we've got the beat machine. We're going to do it because it's Wide Dogs and Hogs. This isn't receivers and deep snappers.
Exactly.
I mean, we're going to get after it, but we'll have a lot of fun guests over the course of this season. One guy, unfortunately, that we won't have a chance to talk with, and you mentioned earlier, Coach Marion Kirby, Page Pirate, one of the great legends. I'm a big fan of Coach Kirby because we're both Gilbert College guys. But when you also look at great coaches who have left us before this 2023 season, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you a moment to talk about your friend, Lawson Holland, who has meant so much to ACC football. I knew him when he was a coach on the North Carolina staff earlier in his career, but this is a guy who really impacted a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and I want to give you an opportunity to share your recollections of Lawson Holland.
Lawson Holland and I are one day apart in birth. He was born September the 29th. I was born on September the 30th, and we've been friends and associates since probably 1979, which is a hell of a long time ago. Lawson was a very good friend. We had the opportunity to work together at the University of Florida and at the Washington Redskins, Commanders, whatever way you want to work at it. And his daughter yesterday at his funeral told me this. She said, we had a unique staff during those years together, and said our kids. She said, I grew up with your daughter. It's like I'm part of your family, and she's part of ours, and that's so true. And I really am thankful that back in June, Bob Pruitt, who is really a hell of a football coach too, and has a Wake Forest background. Bob Pruitt, Bob Sanders, Rod Broadway, and myself went to Myrtle Beach and had lunch with Lawson. We knew Lawson was failing at that time, and Kathy, his wife, turned him over to us for an afternoon. We didn't corrupt him completely, but we damn sure tried. And then on August 8th, I drove. I'm in Wilmington now. I drove down to Myrtle Beach, and I spent the night with Kathy and Lawson. And that was the last time I saw Lawson alive. And he called me last Wednesday And we talked for about 20 minutes and had the opportunity. He never complained one time, not once. And I had the opportunity to ask him how he was feeling. He says, "Oh, I have good days and bad days. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine." And he was gone the next day. But Lawson cared about people. He was a people person, good recruiter, good person, could coach receivers, running backs, any of those things. But he was a ball coach that you were looking for. Gonna miss him.
Well, I appreciate that, and everybody who ever had a chance to meet Lawson or Coach Kirby knew what kind of a great man they were dealing with when they would look them in the eye. And that was one thing about both of those guys. Always felt like they were always looking you in the eye. They weren't looking over here or there. They were always dead right into your pupils. And that's when you know you can trust somebody. And I appreciate your sentiments right there, Coach. And I tell you, that's going to bring us to the end of the first edition of Wild Dogs and Hogs. You're a media legend. I'm telling you. We got move over Corso. We'll put JC in there.
I'm a rookie. I'm nervous. I get shy. No.
You're not shy, Jimmy. But we're gonna have some fun this year. We're gonna bring in some different guests here and there. We'll of course be seeing you on the road with select events with the Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus, brought to us by North Carolina Port Council. And again, I hope you have a great time watching the games this weekend. I'm sure we'll see each other coming up on Monday night over at Wallace Way for the good game at the Tigers and the Blue Devils.
Looking forward to that one. It's a get-together. Matter of fact, it's a little bit of reunion of our '89 Duke team that was co-ACC champions, and we beat the Clemson Tigers that year in Wallace Wade. So Coach Spurrier's looking forward to that one.
Well, I look forward to seeing you there, and also the head ball coach for Coach Jim Collins. I'm Mike Waddell, and thank you for tuning in here to the North Carolina Sports Network and our weekly college football show, Wild Dogs and Hogs.